our studio. Catch them all in News Talks.
Hi guys, welcome back to News Talks. I'm your host Sen, and today we are joined by LONGKANGBRAIN. They are a ground-up initiative focused on mental health in Singapore. They'll be sharing with us their journey and insights on mental health awareness in Singapore. So let's welcome Nico and Casey.
Hi.
Okay. We'd like to know more about LONGKANGBRAIN. What is LONGKANGBRAIN?
Yeah, so basically, LONGKANGBRAIN is an online support group kind of organization. We focus mainly on mental health, but we also engage different topics in Singapore. So another area that we kind of stumbled into was the queer community, because we are part of the community ourselves. So throughout our mental health journey and sharing about mental health and raising awareness, we learned more about what the community wants, and we realized that this was an area that was useful for us to expand on. Yeah.
How do you all create LONGKANGBRAIN? Because I'm sure it wasn't easy, right?
So it started in the pandemic when I had quite a lot of negative experiences seeking help in Singapore. So I felt like a lot more could be done, especially on a community level, because I think in the pandemic there were a few articles going around that Ministry of Health was talking about how mental health was not an essential service during the pandemic, which actually baffled me and a lot of other people in the community, and it made it really hard to even have a space to talk about our experiences without feeling there are more important things that the government or the society can be focusing on. So just after years of pressure from the system, I think I kind of snapped, and there was one night after a bad admission in the hospital, I realized that one thing I really wanted was support from other people, because even the professional help that was available was very textbook. It wasn't something that people could relate to. So I started a support group on Facebook, but of course no one uses Facebook. So I called my good friend Casey. She has experience in HR, and also we were both peer supporters. So yeah, that's how LONGKANGBRAIN started. We started online. We tried Facebook, it didn't work, so we shifted more towards Instagram.
We'd like to ask, because there are a lot of organizations out there, right? What do you think sets LONGKANGBRAIN apart from these other organizations?
So for LONGKANGBRAIN, right, we actually do most of our content on Instagram, and we do a lot of content based on different mental health topics in Singapore, as well as rising concerns that we feel could be relevant to Singaporeans as well as ourselves. And I think one main thing that we post more about that relates to the people online is how our experiences are expressed very locally. Everything that we share, it's all based on real life local experiences, and I think that's what sets us apart.
Yeah, to add on to that, one medium that we use that we realize a lot of other organizations don't use is Google Forms. So basically how that helps us is we curate responses from the community based on experiences they want to share. So if you visit our Linktree, you'll be able to find a bunch of prompts on the Google form that are guiding questions to issues that you may have struggled with or are currently struggling with that you feel that can be improved on in Singapore. So yeah, that was something that we really wanted to emphasize on, because before Instagram had the channel feature, we wanted it to be a safe way for people to still have the support group kind of setting, but in a way where we can regulate and moderate the content without people sharing something that is very triggering or not appropriate. Yeah.
And there's also the option of keeping yourself anonymous, right? Because some people might not want to reveal their identity.
Oh, one more thing. We also do a lot of sandbox discussions.
Yeah, what's a sandbox discussion?
To be fair, it's just a fancy way to call it a workshop. But basically we do events in the community that we feel are important. Like usually we look at like I don't know how to explain it besides like oh, Global Wellness Day or Anti-Bullying Month, you know that
Kindness Day.
yeah. Like everything that the internet tells you need to be focusing on that month. Like we try and incorporate that into our discussions to get people interested.
How do you all like organize this? Like, what was the process like?
How we look at topics is to look at current affairs. So anything that's happening in Singapore, what could be relevant, and as you shared, like whatever days there are, we will also look at that. And from there, we look into credible sources online to see, are there any statistics in Singapore? Are there any accounts or experiences that people have shared previously, publicly? Do we know what resources in Singapore are fit for such cases? And from there, we also look into psychology studies, research, basically anything that can tell us credibly what works and what doesn't work. And from there, we add in our own experiences from our own stories, from other people's stories, what have or have not worked in Singapore in these circumstances. Yeah. And then from there, we curate a workshop content that's more comprehensive, I would say.
Because you guys are like a ground up initiative, so like what were the challenges and like how do you guys like overcome it?
I think our very first initial challenge was the fact that we are raising topics that are not talked about as much in Singapore, which brings into the question, do we expose ourselves, our identities, our faces? And that was one thing that we really had to consider going into this, and our main concern, I would say, is still now.
And how do you like kind of overcome this kind of things, this like fear of vulnerability?
I think
stuff like that.
I think it wasn't until very recently that we actually were comfortable in disclosing our identity, because in the past we felt like it was difficult for us to have our own private lives but at the same time advocate for the community. And I think even now, like, we realize that it is too intertwined for us to take a step back in that sense, because as a community group, we realize that we can't be a community group if we put ourselves out of the community, you know? Yeah, so I think it was more of like personal struggles, because we are still quite young and we were still students, and there are a lot of like scary stories about how your public influence can affect your career in the long run, that kind of thing. So we were very cautious about that, but I think through LONGKANGBRAIN we both developed a sense of like chivalry and also like courage, you know, like to put ourselves out there, because ultimately this is something we're passionate about, and we feel like there are not enough organizations that are willing to put themselves out there besides those non-profits or actual government organizations. So it's important to have a voice in the community.
Okay, my next question to you guys is like, what have you learned from being in this field that you think like people should also like know about?
I think one main lesson that I learned from starting this ground up initiative is that you need to be quite sure of what you want your project to look like, and what are your boundaries with exposing yourself, especially with such like vulnerable content, right? What is the limit that you think you can share with the public? And I think in general, just be very aware that as long as you expose yourself online, anyone can find it. So your family, your friends, and people that you may know at work. So be prepared. And if people ask you about it, I would just say be candid and like honest.
I think something that I would have wanted someone to share with me, you know, if I was in that position, would be, it doesn't take much to actually start an initiative like this, but you really need the passion to sustain it, because beyond just sharing facts and statistics, you really need that experience. And this is not to say like if you don't have much struggles with mental health you can't do this, but you need to have the capacity to be able to empathize with people and you need to be able to view things objectively, because if we keep looking at things from one point of view, then there is no clear objective to what you want to achieve as a grown-up initiative.
What gives you motivation to like keep going and keep like improving yourselves?
I think the main thing is really having the passion, because it's not possible to sustain, at least for me. Something I've learned about myself along the way, LONGKANGBRAIN aside, I'm someone that needs to have the passion to be able to sustain something.
I think for me, what motivates me is my personal goal. I think I knew that since young I wanted to work with people and eventually just in the way that I can contribute to the greater good of humanity.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I mean, in my day job, I also work with people and I aim to maximize what people can do with themselves and what they want to see in their future selves. And doing LONGKANGBRAIN has been like a step away from that, but still aligned with what I want to eventually put out into the world, which is essentially like supporting people as much as I can with my skills and my abilities. So I think that's what really motivates me, like especially when we receive good feedback about how like LONGKANGBRAIN's content have been helpful to them, or the resources that we provide or we talk about has touched them in one way or another. I think that's really one thing that keeps me going. And as a reminder that if you can, there's always a possibility for you to help another person, then why not, right?
The whole motivation thing also stemmed from like my experience with mental health. So like what Casey mentioned, I also have I guess that drive since I was really young, because I felt like really displaced in society. So I always felt like, oh, being different, why is it bad? You know, like why am I being punished for something that I just want to share about like myself with other people, you know? And I think it was quite hard to find a space in school, growing up, or at home to share my thoughts in a safe way. And I think LONGKANGBRAIN really helped us, or helped me rather, like to find that outlet to, I guess, question the public in a way that makes them think about why do we actually do these things? Like, is it something that we can't change? Like, for example, the bullying workshop, you know, like beyond just being a statistic, like it's important to actually like uncover the roots of why things are the way they are. And as individual people, like it's really easy for us to say, oh, it didn't happen to us, so it's not our fault, you know. But beyond that, like as a victim and as a perpetrator, regardless of your identity, like we all have a part to play in making like society better for each other, you know. So once you actually like accept that reality, it becomes a lot more liberating to actually feel motivated to do something, because you are not held back by like what other people perceive you to be.
So other than education, like in school institutions, right, there's also the healthcare side. So like, you know, what can they do better, honestly?
I think for me, I've never been in the public healthcare system, and for me it's always been like private institutions that I reached out to for help. So my experiences would definitely be very varying compared to Nico, who have experiences in like the public healthcare system. But for me, the times where I have reached out for help with the private institutions, they have been really helpful in a sense where they really tailor to your needs. So what I talk about during these therapy sessions, I am well assured that the person that's supporting me is an expert in the topic and typically will not have, in a way, like rules stopping them from supporting me fully. So when I talk about this, I'm talking about like as a person who is queer, as a person who has experiences that may not be exactly typical
Common
in Singapore. I feel like for me, these private sector institutions have been really helpful in that sense, because to them they have probably experienced these experiences before, or they have encountered people who feel safe enough to share these experiences with them, and that's where they build their expertise. And for me, so far in terms of private sector, I would say it's been pretty good. And I think from what I observe, right, people in the private sector, they're more willing to learn constantly. So they update their practices, they keep updated on how they can support their patients better, their clients better. And I think that's what really like reassures me, because at least for the public healthcare system, I don't really see publicly available like information on how the doctors are being updated, you know, as society progresses. How are they being kept up to date with concerns that are like rising issues in Singapore?
I think it's really interesting what Casey shared, because I didn't know that in public sector, like they actually inform you that they are constantly updating their. That's good to know, because I feel like, well, one aspect for why that is possible is because private sector, they are away from the
Government.
scrutiny of like policies and stuff that the government sector is forced to follow, you know. And I mean, I'm sure the system has its reasons, but sometimes it is important to separate the system from people, because people are not meant to be, what's that word?
People are not meant to be put in the box.
There are people.
Yes. People
we
are
don't
not.
put people in the box.
Yeah, you know, like there is no one size fits all when it comes to seeking help. For example, when I was seeking help for an area that wasn't related to mental health, but because I have been diagnosed with certain mental illnesses, when the questionnaire asked me questions about my mental illness, it was very difficult for me to answer. Like, it actually made me cry in that moment, because when I told the doctor or the nurses, I don't know how to answer this because it doesn't reflect how I feel about my mental health, they just said, no, it's just for the system, just take which one is better, which one is the closest. And I'm like, but none of this is accurate, you know, like all the things that they were asking is like, for example, the section about depression was, how many times a week do you feel sad? Or how many times a week do you cry? You know, when was the last time you had like there was one more about sleep, but basically it was like they were asking you for like they were asking you like a numerical value for something that you can't put into statistics, because it's not something that you can
calculate.
Today I'm sad, you know, like people who actually have been diagnosed with depression, they would know that it comes and goes, and it's really not something that you can put into a box. You can't just tick it off like, oh, okay, you know. And I know that these are assessment tools to use to diagnose people. But beyond the diagnosis, what actually is the system doing to help individuals actually feel safe to talk about their stories? Because when you see people in the hospital, like for example, when I was warded, I realized that a lot of people actually what they really needed was support that doctors were not able to provide. You know, that version of feeling like you are heard, feeling like your experience is valid, not having to, you know, conform into a box, you know. The moment where you share something that is slightly out of perspective to what they are used to hearing, they consider you either a threat, or you are considered to have a version of mental illness that only a therapist can help you with. And then again, that process of actually seeing a therapist is really hard in the public sector, because for one thing, therapists, social workers, psychologists, the demand is very high, because Singapore is slowly starting to learn that people are actually struggling. The demand for these kind of healthcare workers used to be pushed aside because it wasn't seemed essential. But now the demand is higher because everyone is coming out of their shells and realizing that they have a voice and they have a right to actually be able to seek help. So what happens when there are not enough healthcare workers and there's too many people? The waiting time becomes like months.
We can see there's a distinction between the private sectors and the public sectors in Singapore.
Yeah, but that's just one opinion, you know. You probably need to like look at it from
But that's like one of the
Yeah.
final like shout out question like, where can we like find Longkang Brain, and like what are your plans for like the next few months?
So you can find Longkang Brain mainly on Instagram, and in our Instagram bio we also have a link to our link tree where we link you to resources that could be helpful for you, as well as whenever we have workshops like sandbox discussions, we'll update the link there as well along with our post.
Yeah, you can also access the Google form in the link tree where you can share your experience.
Thank you once again for coming down and sharing with us like what Longkang Brain do and like just your stories and advice. I wish you guys all the best for your future plans and endeavors. And to our viewers out there, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, anything to get this video up. We'll see you next time on Muse Talks. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.